All right, today we are going over our classification notes. So we've really delved into that there's lots of life on Earth, that it all evolved from a single organism, but now it's evolved into millions of species. So what we want to look at, and an important thing in biology, is how do we categorize these species? How do we put them into groups that actually make sense? You can't necessarily put things into groups just because of how they look. You have to use a lot of other evidence as well. So today we're going to look at biological classification. Imagine like you're sorting out a junk drawer at home, except this junk drawer has every living thing, both alive and extinct. So we're talking millions and millions and millions of species. It's a lot of work to sort all that out. So classification looks at traits that organisms share. So for instance, plants versus animals. Plants have certain traits like conducting photosynthesis that animals do not have. And animals have certain traits like mobility. Some animals have mobility that plants don't have. So we classify based on both body structures or anatomy. We also base it on DNA and other traits because sometimes body structures can be misleading. We start with a very large category, and then the categories get more and more specific. Think about if you are the smallest category. So this is you. Then you're in a group of, let's say, 10th graders at Nova High, right? After that, you're in 10th graders at all of Broward County. Now you're going to be in a group of 10th graders in Florida. Now maybe students in Florida, so on and so forth. So you see your categories get bigger. So if two animals are in the same family, that means they are also in the same order, right? So you get these same three animals in the next category up. So we call this like a nested hierarchy, meaning that the kingdom has the most number and the species has the fewest, or just one. One of the people who helped come up with this system is Carolus Linnaeus. He invented binomial nomenclature, which is a two-word naming system. Basically, this means that there is a Latin name given to all living things. So in the scientific world, instead of saying it's a cat, it's a Felis domesticus. Instead of saying human, it's a Homo sapien. This is really, really important now that there are scientists all over the world studying biology. So if there is a Japanese scientist, a Spanish scientist, a Russian scientist, and an American scientist all working on the same study, you're not having to deal with 5 different names for a tiger. There's one Latin name for that. Now, when we look at scientific names, we are looking at the genus and the species, right? So that's going to be your scientific name. The genus is capitalized, the species is not. So one of the reasons we need this is, what might you call this little creature, right? This little guy, when you poke him, he rolls into this little ball, right? So you might have different things. You might have heard it called a pill bug, a roly-poly, or a potato bug. I grew up calling it a roly-poly, but apparently it's going to be called a pill bug or a potato bug as well. This is the common name, and the common names can differ just by different parts of the world. So it might be a pill bug in some places, a roly-poly in others, and a potato bug in other places, but they're all referring to that same little tiny creepy beetle. Now, we use a Latin name, which just means it's an unchanging language. That language is no longer evolving or creating new words. You're not going to have a word for the internet in Latin. And this is understood by scientists worldwide. So no, we don't speak Latin, but we use the Latin terms so that way we can have one set language, right? So the scientific name for that bug is an Armadillidium vulgare, right? So you might not know how to pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce it, but that's okay. What you want to recognize is that this is the genus, if I can spell, S, and this is the species. All right. So we have different taxa. Taxa meaning category, right? So taxa means category. First of all, we have the domain, then the kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. So this is what you did your mnemonic phrase worksheet on. The genus and the species make up the scientific name. The kingdom is the domain is your largest category. And then you increase in similarity, decrease in numbers. As you go up, decrease in similarity, but increase in the numbers. So two things can belong to the same class that are very different from each other. But two things that are in the same genus are going to be very similar to each other, right? So if you were not able to come up with a mnemonic phrase of your own, one that has been come up for other people is Dumb King Philip came over for grape soda. You could have a lot of different mnemonic phrases for this. So the species is the smallest and most specific group. Organisms that are in the same species can reproduce, and then their offspring can also reproduce. So for instance, a horse and a donkey can reproduce and make a mule. A mule, though, cannot reproduce. It can't have kids of any type, right? So, but a mule is a horse and a donkey hybrid. However, if two things can interbreed, let's say two different types of dogs, so let's say you have a wiener dog or a dachshund and a German shepherd, and they reproduce, then you still have offspring that could technically reproduce. So a dachshund, German shepherd, which is basically just a dog, right? So basically in the same species, they have to be able to reproduce and their offspring have to be able to make more offspring. So one thing, a tool that we use to look at classification here is it's called phylogeny, and it's a family tree that classifies organisms by their evolutionary history. So down here, you're going to have more organisms than you get to very specific organisms, and these branch off of a family tree. Just like if you look at your parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, things like that, and have your own family tree, this is the family tree of life. Another tool we use is a cladogram, which is very similar. Basically, everything down here, everything below this little dash has a vertebra, or excuse me, everything above that has a vertebra. Everything above this has a bony skeleton, which means that this branch that comes off in between them, it does have a vertebra, it does not have a bony skeleton. Sharks are actually made of cartilage, not a skeleton, but they do have a vertebral column, right? So everything after this has 4 limbs, which means this fish does have a vertebra, does have a bony skeleton, but it does not have 4 limbs, if that makes sense. We're going to have a cladogram worksheet that will help you out with that process. All right, the next tool is a dichotomous key. This is like a true-false. So if you had an organism that you found in the wild and you wanted to know what it was, you could go to a dichotomous key and you could answer some true-false questions about it, right? Right, so some of those things, like you would look at this animal and say, does it have feathers? Yes or no. So in this case, we would say no. Does it have legs? Yes. Okay, it's a lizard, right? And then once we got to lizard, we could go into a different dichotomous key and narrow it down further. All right, so when we're classifying organisms, some words you're going to need to remember. And I'm going to pause this real quick. All right, so for our vocabulary, when we're classifying organisms, we're going to be using the following terms, so you want to make sure you refresh on these. First of all, remember early on we had prokaryote. This is an organism that does not have a nucleus. Versus a eukaryote, which are organisms that do have a nucleus that with the DNA inside. Most of what we're going to be looking at are eukaryotes. Bacteria are in that last category of prokaryotes. Right, so within eukaryotes, we are looking at heterotrophs, and this is organisms that have to eat or consume for nutrition. So these are organisms that get their nutrition, which is troph, from different places, so different eating. These are things that have to eat or consume for nutrition. An autotroph automatically feeds itself, so this is through photosynthesis or chemosynthesis, so automatically eating. These are going to be plants and some bacteria. right? We also have unicellular. This is an organism with one cell. And multicellular, meaning many cells. We also want to look at things, based on if they have a cell wall, which is the hard covering outside of the cell membrane. Remember, all living things have a cell membrane. So that doesn't help us classify things if everything has it. So this is a hard covering outside the cell to have a cell wall. We know bacteria, fungi, and plants have cell walls. Right? A cell membrane, remember, this is on all cells, and all organisms have cell membranes. So this would be at the very top level of classification, right? Motile means that they're able to move, right? So these animals are able to move around. So animals, bacteria, and protists are able to move in some capacity. Plants are not motile, they're able to move. Sessile means not able to move, so all plants are sessile. Right. Now, our last two here, we have sexual reproduction. This involves two individuals, right? And they are sharing sperm and egg. Some sexual reproduction occurs outside. So, for instance, in some species of fish, they will release sperm, and other fish will release eggs into the water, and those sperm and eggs come together outside of the parents' bodies. Other sexual reproduction is like you've learned in previous biology classes, where sperm and egg combine actually inside the female's body. Now, sexual reproduction is one way animals reproduce. The other is asexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction not involving sex. This only involves one parent. Remember, this is done through mitosis, right? Not meiosis, it's mitosis. So, an example, one bacteria dividing into two, and they're making exact copies of themselves. So that's it for our presentation on classification. Remember, you can rewatch this on Canvas, and these notes should be attached to your mnemonic phrase worksheet. And if you need to watch this video again, just ask the sub to start the video over so you can continue to take your notes and work on your classification worksheets. All right, have a great day. And remember, if you need any help, to message me on Remind.